All right, so we're going to look at our first pop-up and talk about that experience. We're going to also talk about why we're doing it, and we're going to actually look at some numbers and see if this pop-up thing is worth it. This is the first pop-up, and we're doing a series of them from now until January of 2022. So it's the first week of August. We had our first pop-up where we've started logging data. So we've done a couple pop-ups in the San Fernando Valley area. So this is specific to our demographic, our market, and we're doing this to kind of get a sense of what is the feel of using tabletop games for learning, using tabletop games like modern board games that not a lot of people or the general public aren't necessarily familiar with, and it's really engaging the community on that end and kind of sharing this idea of these games, and also promoting ourselves. So promoting Board Game with Education, which we will eventually be opening as a brick and mortar, and our name is going to be BGE's Tabletop. So kind of transitioning that idea of Board Game with Education into a brick and mortar space. For our first couple pop-ups, I'm going to go over those just in a minute, just a quick minute to talk about those, because that is something we did when we first our first pop-ups, and we kind of just learned what the idea of a pop-up is and what to expect. And then we're going to talk about one pop-up specifically, and then in a different video, we're going to go back and look at some other pop-ups. So this is just the first video talking about why we're doing this, looking at some numbers and how we're going to record it and what we're hoping to gain out of these pop-ups, and talk about the experience of the first one. So the pop-ups we did initially, just to kind of get our feet wet, were at a cafe. So I went to this cafe a lot pre-pandemic. I had a routine where I would come to this office and work a little bit in the mornings, and then I would go to the school in the afternoons. They started doing like pop-ups inside the cafe, and it was just one person, or maybe sometimes they had two. Eventually, I asked them if we would be able to come in and kind of share some of our games and sell the games we carry at boardgamewitheducation.com, and they were happy to have us. And so we did one where we were inside. It was just us and another vendor across from us. Very low key. It was early on when they started doing pop-ups, so foot traffic was kind of small, but they have a very supportive community, which is really great, and getting to know some of those people there. And then we did a second one with the cafe as well, and this one was outdoors. And one thing that you have to keep in mind, especially in this area, well, I think a couple things with that one. So it was over a holiday weekend. It was over the holiday weekend where a lot of people were traveling, because things were kind of opening up with the pandemic and travel was more possible. Campsites were opening up. And then it was kind of hot. So think about those things when you are looking for a place to have a pop-up. If you're kind of exploring whether it's opening a board game store in the area and you kind of want to test the market and get a sense of that, think about those things, because there are a lot of different variables outside of just the location and how well you do and the weather. Like, there's so many other variables, and that's something that I'm going to learn as I go through these pop-ups and talk with you and share my experience with you, some variables that I've kind of learned from now doing a couple. All right, so let's talk about our experience with our first pop-up, where we're really going to dive into some data and share some insights and some things we learned from our first one. So one thing I can say is we will not do this one again. Not that it wasn't a positive experience, and not that it wasn't beneficial. I think it was great, and I think I'm happy we did do it. However, one thing I learned, and something to keep in mind when you're looking for events to go to, or trade shows or other things to host a booth at, is really pay attention to the demographic of that market. So we were definitely out of place at the pop-up, and I had to keep that in mind and really remember that mindset of being happy with what we were able to do and taking what we have and using it for a positive impact with Board Game with Education. So to kind of explain that a little bit more, we had the vendors at the pop-up were either one of three vendors: food vendors, clothing and like shoe vendors, or art, so like painting or handmade crafts. So we were definitely outside of that. And based on the title of the event, I probably should have made some assumptions about that, and I did, but I had reached out to the event coordinator about whether we would be a good fit, and they were happy to have us. Of course, they want the business, they want the event to be successful so they can host another event in the future. And I was also just looking for pop-ups to do. So one thing that was helpful is I did this, and now I know we won't do this pop-up event in the future, and I know how to pay attention to those things in the future as well. So it was really good though, because although our market didn't overlap, and there were definitely, I would say the majority of people were my age. So I'm like 34, so my age or younger, I would say. And I would say even more, the majority were younger, probably early 20s. So definitely not looking for tabletop games for learning or tabletop games for like families, which is a lot of the product we carry. We will be expanding our product diversity, or diversifying our product inventory when we do open the brick and mortar. However, we have a lot of tabletop games that are for learning, a lot of tabletop games that are for family. We do have some party games, so we were able to kind of promote some of those party games that we have, and we do carry Pokemon products. And the Pokemon products really saved the day at this, because that demographic, people that are my age or younger, are really into collecting, and that was helpful to be able to share some of those products that we carry with those guests for the event. We did have a chance to talk to some people, met, I think, 2 teachers, which was really cool, and talk about using those games in their classrooms. So yeah, that was really awesome. And I want to now share some data from the pop-up as well. And this is something you can definitely use and keep in mind when you are going to events, and pay attention to some of these things. We will probably be making changes to this as we go. So we'll probably be adding more data, and it's something that we're going to kind of learn as we go as well. So we have the date, we have the name of the event. I want to just keep out the actual name just for the sake of the vendor and the event. I include the number of hours. This is something I calculated as a human and also working the booth. So these numbers are fairly accurate, but they're definitely not 100% accurate. Essentially, I calculated every single person that walked past our booth. Not that they stopped, they just walked past the booth, and they were a unique person. So if the same person walked past the booth 2 or 3 times, they didn't count them again. So I'm pretty certain I was good at making sure I didn't count someone twice. But there were times where I was maybe helping someone at the booth where I wasn't able to actually calculate or tally someone else. Unique booth visits, these are people that actually stopped by the booth, and whether they picked up a game, they sat there and kind of looked at some games and stood there for a second, or we chatted with them. Number of transactions, so we had 8 transactions. Items sold, we sold 18 different items. Our gross sales were $239. The cost of goods on those sales, so that's not 100% accurate, but it's kind of a rounded number, and rounded as conservatively, which is 40% of our gross sales. And our vendor fee, this one cost $100, so our profit and loss would have been negative $4.16. And then I kind of wrote a note as far as the audience goes, which is kind of a cold audience. We talked to a lot of people that were like, whoa, I didn't realize there were this many board games. So I feel like maybe out of the 62 people that visited the booth, maybe 2 or 3 of them had heard of some of the games that we carried. And as an example of a game that we would carry was Catan. So if you're very familiar with the board game hobby, you know that Catan's like a step up from Monopoly and Risk and some of those games that most people are familiar with. And then this is something that I have to add in. I have to double check on this number to add it exactly. This is a post-event sale, so I know someone that had ordered through our Instagram that was at the event, so they ordered after the event. So actually, we would probably add that to our profit and loss and say this as a positive. So we could also look at something that I'll probably add in future pop-ups is our percentage of transactions for booth visits. This is really good data to know when we want to open our brick and mortar store, because we can look at this as how many people do we need to get in the store to get a percentage of our transactions based on the average cost of an item sold, and to know that and know how much we need to do per day or per hour, which is really cool data to have. And I'm excited to be able to do this. So I'm just going to come back here and wrap up. So we are doing, I want to say 8 pop-ups from now until January, and we'll probably be doing more. Those include local ones like this one, pretty local. Again, 280 unique people. There were definitely more people than that came to the event. I want to say probably like 500, because there were people that didn't come by our booth that I could see at the stage watching the concert. That was another issue with this pop-up, is they had live music, which is really great for people in a really good event, really fun, but it was tough for us as a booth and talking with people who come to our booth. Some other things we learned, and I'm talking with my mentor, my business mentor, is making sure I have business cards. I mean, this is something that, of course, we should do, and have flyers, have things to kind of give away at the booth. Something we're going to try at a bigger pop-up that we have coming is having a large game that people can come by and play. And as part of playing that, they get some sort of prize or reward. And then what other pop-ups we have coming up? We have another local one, which is hosted in the parking lot of a comic book store and a game store. So this is really cool because it's the same market that is coming maybe, or knows about the game store, knows about that community, will be coming and already kind of know what we have to offer as far as products go. And then we have another one that's going to be a big event at the local mall. And as of today, there's over 3,000 tickets sold to the event, free tickets. So this is free. So if you're watching this before August 28th, be sure to check out our Instagram profile. You'll be able to get tickets to that if you're in the Valley, San Fernando Valley. And then we have LA Comic Con, and that's not until December. And then we'll probably go to one outside of the area at BGG Con to kind of share our mission with a broader community outside of the local Los Angeles area. So really excited to share these updates with you. If you have any questions, if you have any suggestions for these pop-ups, if this comes out in time, I'm not sure when this will be released, but if you have any questions, suggestions, comments, leave it below. And we are a new YouTube channel. We'll be sharing other kind of tips and insights into running a business like this on our YouTube channel in our playlist. So be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I think you can subscribe to the playlist. If not, be sure to save that playlist. And we'll see you next time.